Jake Bailey, welcome to the Marketing for Business podcast.
Appreciate it, mate. Good to be here.
Mate, it's awesome to be here. Look, we've met a couple of times recently and I've really enjoyed listening to you inspire some young people. We're obviously part of the inner circle of the Inspire Foundation, and so it's really great to have you. You've flown in from Melbourne today?
I've flown in from Auckland last night.
Yep.
It's been a meandering journey around NZ to get here with work over the last 8 days or so.
Yep.
But yeah, good to be here now.
So you're based in Melbourne? Or?
Based in Melbourne right now, in the process of moving back to Arrowtown currently. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
So what were you doing in Auckland? What's been happening?
So last 8 days or so I've been with 5 clients around NZ, mostly schools throughout that time, just travelling around and working with their teams, students, communities around psychology and the psychology of resilience in particular. So it's my work now, and it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to engage with people over it.
I'm excited to talk about this. So if you've tuned in today for the Marketing for Business podcast, we're not going to talk about marketing today. We're going to talk about resilience. We're going to talk about leadership, and we're going to talk about your journey. You said something as you were wheeled out on stage into the arena for Boys High there. You said, I see further because I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I just thought, man, when we're going to talk today, I want to dig into a little bit of that experience, because 215, the end of 215, explain to me how that just rolled out for you, because, I watched some of those videos and the mana that you held in that room, whether you had cancer or not, was pretty electrifying, right? You were the kind of like the senior monitor at Boys High in Christchurch?
Yeah, so senior monitor, which is basically our term for a head boy or a head prefect, head student. In terms of how 2015 had played out, I mean, it was final year of high school. It was a very normal, very average teenage life for about 3/4 of that year. Yeah. It was, spending time with mates and girlfriend and family and partying in the weekends. It was working relatively hard on studies and in class and playing a bit of sport for the school and sort of planning for the future during the week. So it was a very average, very normal sort of teenage existence. And then things, as we got towards the kind of final quarter of that year, things began to sort of change trajectory a little bit.
Could you feel like you were starting to get sick or something? How did
you? So it all sort of began with initially pain in my wisdom teeth and my jaw, which is sort of the most normal experience I can have with wisdom teeth. It wasn't particularly remarkable at the time, in a very average part of that time of life, I suppose, as well. Yeah. And so, no concern, did what you do and went to my dentist. Yep. And the dentist took an x-ray of the jaw and said that there was a dark mark on one side. And he wasn't particularly concerned about it. He just said that it wasn't an infection of any kind. It wasn't a cyst or an abscess. He wasn't entirely sure what it was, but he wasn't concerned. And he referred me off to a specialist, a maxillofacial surgeon, to have those teeth taken out. And whilst I was waiting for that appointment, which was about a 3-month wait or thereabouts, I began to, in retrospect, I suppose you'd say, develop symptoms, started to have things go wrong with my body. So I lost a lot of weight. Lost about sort of 12 or 13 kgs over the period.
Was that because you didn't want to eat, or was that just you?
It was sort of a combination of factors. Like I say, and it was very rapid was the thing. It was 12 or 13 kgs over kind of 2.5 weeks. It really fell off.
Crikey. At
the time, though, as you touch on, I wasn't eating any solid food. I couldn't chew anything because of this pain in my wisdom teeth and jaw. So I was living off vanilla up and go. I was having a 1 litre bottle for breakfast.
Apparently that's good for your weight loss.
Well, evidently so. Yeah. And so, whilst vanilla up and goes pretty good, it's not exactly complete nutrition. So I wasn't surprised when I lost all of that weight. And then from there, I began to lose the sensation in the bottom half of my face. So through my chin, through my bottom lip, sort of through my jaw. Went completely numb one day, just out of the blue, and that sensation didn't return. Later turned out to be because of tumours, which were beginning to compress the nerves, which supply sensation to that lower half of the face. And the third thing was I just hit the wall, basically. I was in an unwell state for maybe 6 weeks or thereabouts throughout this process. But one day I just woke up and I'd maxed everything out. I was now too sick. I'd lost too much weight. I was in too much pain. I was too tired. I was too exhausted. And that same day, I started to throw up blood. And when I started throwing up blood, I got put into Christchurch Hospital, and it all sort of unfolded from there.
It is crazy because, like, when you said on your, I think it was on your website, you were, dying for dying for the weekends, dying to play sport, dying to have good times with your families and stuff, and next minute you find yourself dying in Christchurch Hospital.
100%.
Man, that's crazy. Did it freak you out? Like, were you freaking out? Like, were you? Because
No.
you're very calm, and like every time I've met you since, you're very, very calm and very collected, right? You don't look like much would faze you now. But how was it? How was it then? Like, were you like just?
I think, and there's probably a few nuances about going through something at that stage of life which changes the way that you react to it or perceive it. And I think, particularly as a young man, and it's teenage guys, young guys are not particularly well renowned for comprehending our own mortality as it is, right? No. That's one of the things which we're actually worst at. And so, as a young guy, I think I was probably relatively naive or oblivious to the risk that there was to my mortality. I mean, I had all of the facts laid out and presented for me. There was certainly nothing which the doctors kind of held back on. But in my head, I never really felt as if there was any other outcome apart from survival. And I stress again, this wasn't powerful mindset or relentless optimism or bravery or courage or whatever. None of that kind of shite. It was just purely teenage naivety and foolishness. But the flip side was that it meant that my journey, I suppose, that diagnosis initially, but also the journey through the cancer was psychologically a lot easier than it could have been otherwise, because there never was in my head this burden of what if I don't, what if this goes wrong, what if I don't come out the other side of this. In my head that never even crossed my mind, just as a naive teenage guy.
Well, the beauty of that, right? Because you look at the speech that you made at Boys High and that became quite famous, right? Millions of views. You're obviously now knowing a bit of what you just said. You were pretty sick in that when you delivered that.
Yes.
And to the outsider, you're in a wheelchair, but you were so kind of stoic to some degree. The way you delivered a talk, not knowing the future. Talking to your peers about going out and not. I think you mentioned and you talk about you actually mentioned with Jim Rohn, and the quote that you win is let others, when Jim Rohn talks about let others think small things but not you, and I found that quite captivating, because I love Jim Rohn too, and I was just like, wow, here's a kid who's telling his peers fucking go get it, but he doesn't know. So was that just that naivety then, or did?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, and funnily enough, the speech itself was written prior to the diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
Nothing was changed, particularly after the diagnosis. There were a few tweaks and adjustments to sort of, kind of maintain the tense of it, I suppose, and to adjust things slightly. But the bulk and body of it was written beforehand. It just happened to become, in many areas and in some ways, far more, I guess, relevant and pertinent post-diagnosis. Which was quite funny to look back on. It sort of gave me reassurance that I had cut to the crux of things with the original speech I'd written. If it still stood up post-diagnosis, I thought. So that was a lot of those things were just general things which I'd believed before and continued to.
And was that what you'd learned at school there at Boys High, or was it your parents that had given you that kind of background in?
I think it was. I don't know. I think it was probably life and the people that I'd been surrounded by, and they had come from many different fields and arenas. Whether it was, as it was for some of them, school, people that I'd met, particularly the old boys that I'd met through my time at school, and some of the incredible knowledge and wisdom that had been passed down to me through some amazing old boys that I'd had the privilege of meeting and getting to know through the school. Parents, family, role models and idols, and people I'd been surrounded by. I think I'd been really fortunate to have known and been taught by some really incredible people in my life at that point. So, it
all adds up to where you were at that time, right? You referenced your Uncle Ross in that speech, and I thought that was pretty cool. He was the first person to do a kidney transplant in New Zealand's history.
100%.
How cool is that? And sadly, he passed away.
Yes.
And your middle name is Ross.
Yes.
Do you remember him at all? Or
no, he passed away in April of '97, and I was born in August of '97. So we just missed each other. But in many ways, I do feel like I know him because his legacy and impact has continued on for so long after his passing.
How good.
And in so many ways, during my time in hospital, I would have nurses and doctors who would pop into my room and who would just come and say hi because they knew that I was his great nephew, and they had worked alongside him and had such immense respect for what he had done, and would come and share incredible stories of his work and their interactions with him. I had nurses who would do a medication check or detailed check before they give you medication. They ask for your full name, and you'd say, in my case, Jacob Ross Bailey, and they would say, oh, not a relation of Dr. Ross Bailey.
Oh, really?
And
good.
And even, there's a squillion anecdotes. My grandmother used to cut out all of the death notices which referenced him and thanked him for his work, which continued up until until she passed away back in 2014, which was obviously the better part of 20 years after Ross passed away. People were still, she'd get one a month where she'd go through the death notices and cut one out mentioning him and thanking him.
That's so cool. I read a book by a guy called Ed Milet, and he talks about being the one. And it was interesting how he was the first one in the family to go to university, and he obviously decided at some point, like, I'm going to change the lineage of what we're doing. And the lineage might not have been good or bad, but for him it was, hey, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to impact people's lives, and he decided to be the one that did that. I thought of that when I heard you say that. I thought that, wow, what an inspirational guy, and obviously changed so many lives, and the pioneering spirit to actually go and do a kidney transplant. Wow,
yes, and he was very much from that background where he had broken the mold as well. He was the first of our family to go and do tertiary study. He worked doing milk runs in his spare time to fund his way through university, coming from an extraordinarily working class background, and went on to achieve exceptional things.
How good.
Just because he wanted to make a positive difference, which I think is so incredibly inspiring.
So good, eh? And that's, I guess, the power of making decisions and being committed to things. And I think a little bit of that's lost in today. I want to talk to you about that. The man in the arena that you mentioned, the quote that you mentioned in your speech. How do you see that playing out? And why did you want to tell your fellow students that story? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that Teddy Roosevelt quote is my favourite quote. I got asked at a school I was at yesterday in Auckland. It was intermediate school as well, so it was about a 12-year-old kid, and he asked what my favourite quote was, which I thought was a fantastic question from a 12-year-old. And it still is that Teddy Roosevelt quote. It's become decreasingly so over the past few years because it now has the unfortunate association with disgraced MPs. Every time an MP resigns from Parliament in disgrace, they always cite that quote in their resignation letter, which is unfortunate. But it's an exceptional quote. And I suppose the reason that I put it in there is when I wrote that speech, and for the year preceding that end of year function, I suppose always questioned whether I was up to the job as senior monitor at Boys High. I hadn't felt like I deserved the role, and I know that there were a lot of other people around me who didn't think that I deserved the role.
Is that because of the people that come before you, or
I think it's probably the people who were alongside me throughout that. There were some exceptional young men who I had the privilege of walking that journey alongside, who quite possibly were better positioned for that role than I was. And so for me, I think that the heart of that quote was the fact that I wanted other people to know that regardless of how they perceived my performance, I genuinely had done my best in that role and performed it to the fullest of my abilities.
Yeah, and you're in that arena doing your best, though.
100%.
Because it's a lot easier just to throw stones from the outside. Right? and I think as anyone in New Zealand who puts their head up a little bit, that can happen to you, right?
100%.
Which is sad. You also said the future is in our hands. Did you think that was even more important when you were saying that, because the future, was in your hands? It was kind of out of your hands. You were talking about your body and maybe how your body was going, but the future is in our hands. And I thought that was really good, saying that to a group of kids, knowing your circumstances. But was that one of your beliefs, like the future is in?
Yes, it was at the time, and I think it increasingly has been since then, probably far more strongly now than it even was then. I think going through that experience with cancer and walking that journey alongside so many other young people who were facing that same battle, and many of whom did not have the same outcome that I've been so fortunate to have, I've really come away with an impression or a sense that we have an obligation to go out and live our life to the very fullest on behalf of those who don't have that opportunity to do so anymore. So I think certainly at the time, but even more strongly now, I've held that sense that the future does belong to us, and that we are obliged to grasp it and run with it.
I think that's, just that there is so powerful too, because so many people don't even live their lives, right? Like this is a smaller thing, way smaller than what you went through, but I remember after the earthquakes, and I remember sitting down with someone and feeling a bit guilty because our business was okay, and he was like, Scott, you can't be playing small just because everyone else is hurting. You shouldn't be sitting down going, oh, poor me, oh, I don't want to put my head up because all these other people's businesses are can't get into their business, right? And he said, we need people shining the light, not people dimming everyone else's light. And oh man, it hit me it really hit me hard that, hey, and I love what you've just said there, because some people haven't made it, and I've had good mates die from cancer and stuff, and you kind of makes you think, far out, we have a kind of a saying, a mate of ours, Baz K, he passed away, and it's come hashtag with all the boys is, what would Baz do?
Yeah, sure.
Because Baz was the leader of all he would take us on all the trips, he would organise everything, hey, you want to go to the rugby, he'd be off, so we kind of have a saying now, what would Baz do?
Yeah, sure.
And it's become quite motivating for a lot of people that probably wouldn't make decisions. And I think that it's great to have you're now leading the way there, because families, I guess, when someone passes, the legacy that those people have, but having someone that can actually speak on their behalf to some degree as well, it's really, really powerful. So 2015, then Jan 2016.
Yes.
So you get good news.
Yes.
How does that feel? Like, what's the... Because you had one of the... If people don't know the story, you had one of the fastest growing cancers you can get, right?
The fastest growing cancer,
What's that?
Burkitt's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a hell of a mouthful. Yeah. Which is ironic, because I had a hell of a mouthful of the cancer as well. Yeah. So. And
it spread to a lot of your organs,
it was through... brain lining, eye sockets, nasal passages, sinuses, gums, jaw, spinal fluid, pancreas, and both kidneys. So it's pretty diffused.
And they obviously got it at the right time, right? Like they caught it.
Wow.
They could have caught it earlier. Yeah.
But it was cutting it fine. It was about 2 weeks left to live at that point without treatment.
Wow. So you went straight into treatment?
Straight into treatment. I had about a day or two in between while they did sort of pre-chemotherapy prep stuff.
But in saying that, you were sick. You were you were sick.
Yeah, remarkably unwell.
And then so then you go through it, and I've seen some of the photos and stuff, and it looks horrific. And then you get news. Hey, how did that feel? What was that?
So it was about 3 months to the day later that I was told I was in remission. Remission just
did you believe it?
Because I was always waiting for it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I
did
never
you start
had any.
To feel better, or like?
I started to feel better. Probably a few weeks into the treatment. And some of those initial scans that I'd had done a few weeks into the treatment had shown really positive signs in terms of how the cancer had receded and begun to clear. How did it feel? I wish I had a better answer for it. It's a very, very boring answer to a very good question. And it was just very, very nothing at all. It wasn't anything you might expect. It wasn't, happy, excited, relieved, elated. It was none of those positive emotions you might expect. It was very neutral. It was very blank. It was very, very empty. And it was very reminiscent of how I felt when I was told that I had the cancer, which was, again, none of the emotions, angry, scared, sad, afraid, or whatever it might be. That was also very... very neutral, very, very disconnected from the emotion around that. So I'm not sure. I've spoken to a lot of other young people and older people as well who have been through that same journey, and from what I hear, that seems to be a relatively common experience to have these very neutral reactions to this big news.
I guess because you've gone through such a lot, right? So it's like, half the time probably still in shock of everything that's gone on to the body, right?
Yeah.
So I guess And we'll talk about this, but first, raspberry jam, strawberry jam.
Big raspberry jam, man.
I thought that was really interesting,
Yes.
but for the people who don't know the story, in hospital you were getting strawberry jam.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
and you're not a fan.
Yeah, no, you get your little you get your little menu that you tick the boxes for what you want for breakfast the next day, and there's toast and Sarah and so I don't have toast, and then there was a box for jam. There was nothing more specific. There's marmalade, Marmite, jam, and I'd tick jam.
Yeah. And they'd obviously sometimes deliver you strawberry, which you don't like, but then one day you got raspberry.
Got my raspberry jam.
Tell the people what that meant to you, though, because I think that's it's a good insight to humans, and sometimes how we just don't celebrate enough of the small things in our lives.
Yeah, well, the context in which I tell that story is that, I'm, like you said, not a big fan of the strawberry jam, big fan of raspberry jam, and you have to sort of set the scene of a young, emaciated, very unwell-looking young guy being in a very, very, sort of, I suppose, dark or hopeless, relatively hopeless part of the hospital. I mean, it's surrounded with, beautiful staff and lovely people, but at the end of the day, it's a chemotherapy ward full of very sick and dying people. And then you have to picture him, opening the cupboard in his wall and getting his breakfast tray and finding raspberry jam and physically sort of jumping in the air with elation and excitement about having raspberry jam. And I guess I recount that story because for me it sort of demonstrates that even in the darkest moments, in the darkest places, there's still the capacity to try and find something good, something positive to draw out of the situation. And for me in that moment it was raspberry jam, and other times it would be other things. But I think, and as I know sort of in my subsequent study in psychology and the work I do now, that ability to what we call salvaging, the ability to try and find silver linings, to try and find the good within the bad is such a powerful part of what gets people through adversity.
Yeah, and I think you said finding light within the darkness, and so let's talk a wee bit about that, because I think, the economies that we live in today, like we're living in times that for a lot of people it's really, really tough.
Absolutely.
Right? And there's a lot of there's a lot of unwellness out there in a whole bunch of aspects of our society. So when you're talking to people today, and like you're going into schools now, and the message around that, what are some of the key things that you're looking to depart and educate kids and even adults with when it comes to that? Looking for good in darkness, because I know, like we've just had I Am Hope been given a bunch of money by the government and stuff like that, and the sad part about that is it's needed. Like we've got kids that are really living in dysfunction. We've got even kids that aren't even living in dysfunctional families, but for some reason having thoughts and stuff these days that are not the greatest. What is it that you are now teaching people?
So I guess the work is specifically around the psychology of resilience. When it comes to working with young people, I guess the starting point, you have to paint the picture or make the case of why resilience. Why does resilience matter? Why do we need resilience? When it comes to working with adults and people who've got out into the world and faced life a little bit, you're at the advantage of not having to explain why resilience, because all of us have gone through challenges and setbacks and adversity so painful, so unfathomably difficult that we probably never could have imagined overcoming it prior to when we had to. But for our young people, it's about building the case that the people who we know go on to be the happiest or have the highest level of well-being over the course of their life, and generally the people who go on to be the most successful, are not necessarily the ones who we associate with being well-positioned to succeed. They're not just the ones from wealthy families, they're not the ones from privileged backgrounds, they're not the ones who are born talented or intelligent. It tends to be the people who just have this grit, this ability to be resilient, the ability to pick themselves up and recover from things going wrong, who go on to succeed. Because the reality is that resilience is a precursor for success. If you have all of those other factors, if you're wealthy, talented, intelligent, but you lack that resilience, you will never go on and achieve anything, because you will fall at the first hurdle.
So how do you learn that then? Is that learned? Or
well,
is
100%. And I suppose that's the next part is once you've built that case or explained the significance of why it matters, you then go on to explain that, hey, not only is this resilience, this intangible skill going to be the most important factor of your life, the great news is we have evidence-based tools and skills and strategies which we know from research and study are proven to make you more resilient, proven to make you better at getting through tough times. And you can say to people, hey, hand on heart, I've got tools and skills which will make it easier for you to roll with life's punches, to bounce back and recover from the things which do go wrong in all of our lives. and then finding a way which you can communicate that information in a way that people can, I guess, understand it and relate to it, can retain it, and then go on and utilise it in a practical sense.
I want to talk about some of those tools and some of those skills in here as well, but I think you would have heard this the other night. We were at the Inspire Foundation. Scotty Robertson, ex-Crusader, now All Black coach, was talking. He talked about Sam Whitelock. He talked about why he was resilient, and I don't know if you picked it up as well, but he said, Sam would have had to, he's on a farm, so he would have learned to drive when he was young. He was on a farm, so he would have had to catch the bus by the time he was 8 years old by himself. So that means he would have had to come home and do a lot of sort of stuff. So he would have had to be resilient and resourceful by himself. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And the success leaves clues, right? Here's an All Black captain. But that resilience would have been built in those younger years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that is how we develop resilience, right? It's a sense of self-efficacy. It's our ability to believe in our own ability to get through things because we have got through things previously. That is how, as people, we know that we can get through life, is because you can come up against a challenge and you can say, I know I can get through this divorce because I've got through a redundancy before. I know I can get through, the loss of this family member because I've got through X, Y, or Z before. We build up our ability to get through life by having the belief and confidence in ourselves based on things we've achieved previously.
So good. One of my younger staff members said to me the other day, we kind of get issue. They've been here for 90 days, and we're talking to them. What did you learn in those 90 days? She goes, Scott, I love being here because you allow us to swim in the deep end.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, true. That's because I want you to be resilient.
Absolutely.
I don't want people around that I have to go and pick something up, or I don't mind having. People can ask me questions, but I guarantee I'm going to ask you two back.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not going to just give you the answer, and I think that's part of it too, right? It's building. So, what are some of the tools that you use to teach people how to be, especially some of these young people, because we get lots of families will be listening to this, and that, what are some of the things that you teach?
So the way that I generally teach around resilience, some of these skills or tools, is something like called the 4S model. 4 things, evidently all beginning with the letter S, which we know from studies and research are proven to make people more resilient. So in short, to sort of race through it and do it briefly, first S is slowing down, which is your ability to take a big challenge or a big problem and break it down into a series of smaller, more manageable pieces and tick them off one by one in a logical sequence. Your ability to think your way or forge a path through a problem.
Was that something that helped you get through the cancer as well?
Absolutely. 100%. Going into that cancer, if I had looked at the 3 months of treatment and chemotherapy and then the 5 years of the risk of a relapse or the cancer hanging back, if I had looked at the outset at this challenge of beating cancer or getting through cancer, it would have been entirely insurmountable, right? It would have seemed impossible to overcome. And that is certainly what the research shows us. It's that people who go into adversity with a wide-angle lens or a long-term time frame mindset tend to be the ones who come off on the wrong side of stuff. Instead, they should be trying to face things on their own terms, whether it's a month at a time, a week at a time, a day at a time, whatever it may be. So breaking things up. It's the first S. Second S, which we talk about, is the idea of salvaging, which we just alluded to there, the ability to try and find good within the bad, the ability to try and find silver linings. We know that people who adopt what in psychology is called realistic optimism, the ability to be realistic about a situation, which is often to say this actually is shit, but in spite of that, to try and be optimistic about it, to try and draw out the good or positive within that. Those are the people who are best at navigating challenges in life and overcoming things. The third S, which we talk about, is streamlining. And streamlining comes down to trying to manage the stress and anxieties which we take on during adversity. And I'm sure that, for yourself and for your listeners, you'll have this sense that when you are going through a tough time and something goes wrong, we as humans have this real tendency to catastrophize and pick up everything which is wrong. When something is bad, we view everything through this lens of being bad, and we tend to try and take on things which are peripherally or tangentially related to this problem, instead of trying to actually solve the core of the problem. And the story which I tell, which illustrates this quite well, is that when I was first diagnosed as an 18-year-old guy, right, you go through the chemotherapy, the treatment, you lose your hair, your eyebrows, your eyelashes, which as an 18-year-old was already, as I think we all are as teenagers.
Good looking hair.
it was a lot of it, that's for sure, a lot more than now. But you sort of, you go through that life being insecure and self-conscious and so on. and for me as a young guy, that actually prevented me from often going and doing the things I should do, because you'd go out in public, you'd be stared at, not in a malicious way, but in a very sympathetic way. But as an 18-year-old, the last thing you want is to attract attention. And so as a result of that, I wasn't going out for, spending time out in the park or going for a walk in the park. I wasn't going and catching up with mates and spending time with mates. I wasn't doing all of these things which I should have been doing. And I came to realise with time that not only was this detracting from my ability to deal with the core issue, the cancer, it was actually going towards working against the outcome which I was trying to achieve. Right? I was wasting and squandering effort and energy on these inconsequential things like being self-conscious.
How quickly did you pick that up? Like, how self-aware were you?
It would have taken months. It would have taken a significant period of time.
And did anyone put a lens on it?
No. The staff in the hospital were really good at trying to encourage you to get out and to be out of the hospital and not become too ingrained within that sort of that setting or that clinical environment. But for me, it was something which I had to come to the realization myself. I think that the way that I was viewing things was actually going against achieving the outcome I wanted to. And at its core, that's what the idea of streamlining is. Lucy Hone, Dr. Lucy Hone, is an expert in this field who many people will be familiar with. The way that she sort of phrases this is what I'm doing helping or harming? During adversity, during tough times, we have this tendency to squander our already limited effort, attention and resources on things which don't go towards the outcome we're trying to achieve. So the idea of streamlining is to make sure that we're investing our time, effort and energy towards things which actually go towards the outcome we're trying to achieve. And then the fourth and final S is what we call standing alongside. And the story, there's an anecdote which comes with this, which I like to tell to set the scene. It was a few years ago now. I worked with the United States Forest Service in Sacramento, and the United States Forest Service is effectively the US government version of DOC, the Department of Conservation. They do all the same stuff. They're very outdoorsy, but just because the US is so immensely large, they do it really tough. They sort of spend up to 6 months of the year by themselves or with one other person in the middle of nowhere, 500 k's away from the nearest civilization. And so really their job is to survive out there. And after I presented to their team, one of the guys came up to me and what he said was, in the United States Forest Service, we have 2 rules to ensure we don't die out there. The first rule is we don't go out unprepared, and the second rule is we don't climb mountains alone. And what he said to me was, I think you'll find this relates to resilience as well. And on that first point, not going out unprepared, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Having some skills and tools. But on that second point, far more interestingly, not climbing mountains alone, if you take that as a pretty cheesy metaphor for going through life's challenges, right? We know that people who climb mountains alone, people who go through tough times by themselves or without the support of other people, have absolutely abysmal, appalling outcomes compared to people who go through tough times with the knowledge that someone else has their back, right? With the knowledge that someone else is there to support them. So the fourth and finally, standing alongside is about investing time and effort and energy towards developing those networks and connections so that when things do go wrong, we know that there's someone who's got our back.
And I think that's a big part of it. Like, one of the charities that we look after is Lean on a Gate, which is in the farming community. And they've coined this, hey, lean on a gate, talk to a mate. And a big part of that is you're not alone. But in the farming community, a lot of it was really evident through COVID. After COVID and during COVID is, farmers might not see a lot of people, but the people they do see, they rely on. So when the stock agent couldn't come, when the grain agent couldn't come, and all these people that used to come and they'd have chats with, all of a sudden couldn't come, and then they couldn't go to the local, and they couldn't do a whole bunch of stuff, and they kind of felt like they were forgotten about because a lot of them were having to keep working to keep the country going to some degree as well, right? And the suicide in farming is incredibly high. So that lean on a gate, talk to a mate is a message, and that's definitely a part of it. Don't climb the mountain alone. You don't, because I think there's a lot of people, especially they don't. Some people, misery loves company, but a lot of people are like quite private, right? And they don't want to share that sort of stuff, or they don't want to burden other people. But the fact is, the more you can talk about it, the better, right?
Absolutely, 100%, and that's certainly what the research shows us, is the people who have these networks and communities are the ones who can navigate challenges in life most effectively. And I think as guys particularly, we've got a real tendency to, when things are good, believe that we can go it alone, believe that we don't need that support around us.
Yeah.
And then it's only when it's too late, when things actually fall over, that we find, hey, we did actually and do actually need the support of others around us to get by. So
I just on the salvage one, I went to the Cancer Society ball the other night, and a young kid by the name of Caleb, I think he was 10, got up and spoke. It was an incredible talk, and he talked about, you know, that salvage aspect, looking at positives, and he was talking about his beads and how proud he was of his, and he had like this 500th bead, and you know, when you hear all the stories about why he's got the beads and stuff, and they're horrific, you know, but there is something he was holding on that, you know, that he was salvaging something from the. And I just thought, man, what a, you know, when you look at the 4 things you've said there, that was one of those things that he was, you could tell it was meant a lot to him, you know, and I really, you know, I went up and said to him afterwards, probably one of the best talks I've ever seen. You know, like it was inspirational, but you know, for him to have, you know, he definitely had salvaged the positive stuff inside a world of you know, darkness.
Absolutely, those are the people that tend to navigate through tough times the best. And I think for a lot of people as well, humour is a really big part of that. Being able to salvage humour as a coping strategy during adversity is a really powerful thing. Yeah.
One of the things you talked about too is, and I think this is happening for a lot of people. You know, they let fear steal a lot of their future. You know, and you talked about that, and I think. Well, let's talk about that, because I really believe I see this a lot now, and people worry about what other people think of them.
Yes.
And I remember going to a seminar probably 20-something years ago. The guy's book's over there, Brad Sugars, and he said, what anyone ever thinks of me is none of my business. And I just remember it. And I just remember going, you know what? I'm going to use that as a mantra. You know? And I think my son's got a bit of that in him. You know? I've got a feeling he's got a bit of that in him, because he doesn't care. He went to school today with a pair of one yellow sock on, one grey sock on. You know, all his mates. They're doing different. Like, they love playing football, they love it, but they don't care.
Yes.
You know? And I think, you know, was that part of something that you really learnt?
I probably not prior to the cancer.
No, but after?
Through the cancer, And you know, as I often do, meet young people like you describe, who clearly have been able to manage and overcome some of those, you know, discomforts that we all experience around, you know, being self-conscious or insecure, particularly at that age and stage of life. I find it so admirable, and it's such a great setup and launching platform for them to go out into the world, being, you know, entirely uninhibited in the way that they approach life, because they're not held back by other people's opinions. I think, for me, the cancer was probably a relatively big part in that shift for me, because, like I say, you go out in public and you attract a lot of attention, and you have to come to terms with that as a result of that. But it's also the fact that being in a hospital, being under treatment in the way that I was, it makes you extraordinarily vulnerable. It's, you know, that you're at the lowest point of your life, you are unable to care for yourself, and as a result of that, you have to lean on other people around you. You're forced to rely on other people, many of whom are complete strangers, sort of thrust into your life unexpectedly and without your permission, to see you at your weakest and most vulnerable. And you have to you know, find a way to I guess to process that, and a big part of it is, I guess, disregarding or letting go of any concern around how they might think of you or view you, right?
Because the crazy part too is, you know, those people just with all their heart are just wanting the best for you, right?
Yes.
And they're not judging you at all.
No.
You know, but often a lot of people think other people are judging them.
Yeah, it's a very human, very natural part of us, right?
And if they are judging you, it's none of your business.
That's a good way to think of it.
So that, have you found yourself a lot less fearful after, you know, you this experience?
Yeah, I think less fearful. Yes, it's probably more that and you know, hopefully without it sounding too sort of sanctimonious, basically what it boils down to for me is that being in the hospital, being on that ward, being surrounded by, you know, other people, other young people who were going through that same journey as I was I am very cognizant of the fact that I was extraordinarily lucky to walk out of that place and not be wheeled out of there in a back. And I know that because I saw and met and made friends and connections with other people who weren't quite so lucky. And so for me, it really boils down to the fact that I feel a sense of obligation or responsibility to go live my life to the fullest on behalf of those people. The reason being that if the roles were reversed, that's all I could have ever asked of them, right? It's all I would have ever wanted was for them to just go out and give things a decent shot on my behalf. And so I really do feel that sense of responsibility to go out and to try and to do my best for them. But I think that's probably where I take the attitude of life and maybe any reduction in fear. I think that's probably where that comes from. The thing is, I don't think that that's a responsibility which I bear alone, because I can't figure out why it would be. Like, is it my job? And I think people understand why I feel this sense of responsibility. But if you follow that logically, why is it my job? Is it my job because I met these people? Is it my job because I saw them? Is it my job because I was lucky? I don't think any of that really stacks up. I think societally, we have all the responsibility, a shared collective responsibility to go out and get out there and do things on behalf of those people who don't have the opportunity to do so anymore.
Totally. And I think as good humans, we want to make the place a better place. You know, we want to inspire people. We want to touch people. We want to give our best of the world too. So what inspires you today then?
I think that, like I said, that probably that at its core is what I carry most around. There is a certain, and again, I'm mindful that potentially if I fail to communicate it correctly, it can come across as probably sanctimonious. But I think for me, knowing that, understanding at all times what the alternative would have been, knowing that every day that I get is just infinitely better than being dead 8 years ago is really powerful motivation. And to come in here today and to do this podcast is always going to be great. It's a great opportunity. I just grabbed lunch in town with a mate on the way here. Catching up with a mate, having lunch, that's great. That's fun. But if you look at that through the lens of the alternative being dead 8 years ago, it makes grabbing lunch with a mate or being here for a podcast, infinitely better. It just lends life this most exciting lens.
So how can people then? Let's challenge some people here, because maybe there's some people not playing the game they should be playing, right? And they're not taking their life to in the direction they wanted to go. What do you say to those people? Because when you've been that close to dying, and now you have this opportunity again you used to have this opportunity to really live your life and make some, I guess, some real positive impact in other people's lives. What do you say to people that are maybe struggling with where to go to for the next step? They can't see past maybe the rut they're in.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't want to give the impression that my world perception is always sort of sunshines and rainbows. I'm not sort of head in the clouds in that kind of way.
No, but you're a person that does a lot to help other people.
And as I think we all do in one way or another. I think, as you say, we all do our best. But for me as well, there are still days when I get caught up and waste time worrying about small inconsequential stuff. I still get grumpy. I still get cut off in traffic. I still get, someone says something rude or something irritating, and it still plays on my mind. I don't sort of, bound around like a golden retriever puppy all day thinking about how lucky I am to be here. I understand that it's not natural nor normal to view life through this positive lens all the time, and I don't think that's something we should aspire to either. And life is about balance. There has to be this sort of yin and yang, and sometimes life does have to be shit, and sometimes you have to think to yourself, well, I feel like shit and this sucks, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I think on the whole, at the end of the day, you have to be able to take charge of the situation and move towards what you want to achieve in alignment with your values.
Do you have any tools that help you with that?
I think having a really good understanding of your values and who you are as a person gives you a really good starting point of what you want from your life. It's actually, in psychology, and in particular in this field called positive psychology, which is the study of, what makes people good, happy, what leads to high well-being. There's been a lot of research done into try and find, this link between happiness and high levels of well-being and what creates that in people's lives. The idea being that if you could find something that everyone that's happy in life has in common, you found the proxy for happiness in life, right? And so we've tested everything from income levels to free time to exercise to relationships and loved ones and whether you're born in a first or third world country, all of these different things consistently, the question or the test which tends to best predict a high level of well-being is the question, do you live your life in accordance with your values?
Yeah.
That is the best predictor of a high level of well-being. If you can answer yes to the question, do you live your life in accordance with your values, you're infinitely more likely to be happy in life, and the inverse is true as well. So,
do you reckon the people that aren't happy is because they're living someone else's values?
Oh, it often can be. It often can be, and if people are able to, shift and direct their lives around their own values and what they want from life, then by and large, I think people generally will be happier, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think, I always remember my grandmother saying to me, my great-grandmother actually, Scott, treat other people how you'd want to be treated.
Yeah.
And I've always thought about this. And but I always used to watch her because I don't know why early on, but I'd always watch. And she would always treat people with the utmost respect. She'd always be courteous. She'd always ask questions. She was always, so you could see, but then she got it back.
Yeah.
She got it back in spades, and it was one of those values that I just hold on to in my life. And it's, I teach my son this, obviously, my family. Treat other people how you'd want to be treated. It's a pretty simple gauge of how if you put good out there, you're probably going to get some good back.
Yeah.
You put some bad out there, you're probably going to get some bad back. Right? And for me, and I know, I've thought about my values. I've thought about my business core values. Be team focused, world class training, world class outcomes. Influence through insights, celebrate your victories. They are ones that we'll stand up on a morning, every morning, and we talk about different core values, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And I think because we have those values, it allows everyone to have a really good grounding and focus. And I think, where do you teach people, how do you teach other people values that really, a lot of people these days are getting their insights, their thought leadership from some strange areas of this world, with the likes of social media and even news and TV and that sort of stuff. How do we help our young people get back on track when it comes to that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think, as you say, I don't think it's so much about teaching or bestowing values upon others. I think it's about unlocking ways for people to understand themselves and what their values are.
Yeah, so how do they do that?
Well, yeah, like I say, as a society, I think we've come to view values as a list of expectations or rules, right? We tend to... values at their core, particularly from a psychological perspective, are the underpinnings of who we are as people, and instead we've unfortunately turned them into a bit of a measuring stick which we judge other people by, and often a bit of a wacky stick where if we dislike other people's views or perceptions of the world, we tend to call their values into question, which is not the way that we should be viewing or thinking of values at all. There's great tools and exercises for people to use. VIA is a great thing. If you like values in action or VIA, it's a questionnaire which allows you to identify your personality strengths using psychologically proven methods and testing, and gives you a great understanding of your values and how they, I guess, direct or dictate how you conduct yourself, who you are as a person. There's other tools called Strength Profile, for instance. A lot of these are more specialised and some of them are paid, but VIA is a great starting place. It's a free tool to utilise, and it's very well renowned internationally.
I started thinking about this recently, and I don't know why, but I have. Because I was brought up, my dad was a freezer worker, 47 years, right? And my mum worked at home, raised kids. Mum and dad split up, so mum looked after us. Not a lot of money in the household, but we never went without, the basics, right? But then I started business. But the whole way through, kind of always told, business people are this, that, and everything. They're either greedy, they're this, they're that. And I didn't have any other reference. My grandfather, my grandfather was farmers. My grandfather had 2 farms when it was going very, very well. Then he got hit in the head by a post, and subsequently some things went wrong, and he basically passed away. So I had real no entrepreneurial kind of, and always heard that, business people are greedy, this and this. And then I started my own business after working in the corporate world for a while. So I had all these other beliefs and values, and then I started working and running my own business. And then I started meeting all these business people, and I couldn't work out why they were so friendly. you know, and it was
Yeah.
because I've started thinking about it like 20 years later, like, wow, you know, how not that my parents were wrong, but just their view of this group of people was wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because like some of them now that when I first started have now become friends and like, you know, like they're the nicest people ever.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it was just I find that quite interesting how when you start to look at maybe some things, you know, what values were you taught or what values did you see and then all of a sudden, you know, you start to unravel them as you really, especially I think as you start to give back as a business owner, as you become the person that you know you kind of your parents were saying were greedy and stuff like that. All of a sudden you become the person that's not. You know, but that was the person they were talking about, the business owner. So, yeah, bit off tangent, but you know, when it comes to values, I really see that because, you know, the people with the strongest values I see are the happiest.
Yes.
You know, and it doesn't matter who they are, rich, poor, whatever. If they've got good values, they are the happiest, and you can feel it being around them.
Yeah, it gives a sense of direction and a sense of purpose, right?
Yeah,
I think that gives you great confidence as you move out into the world.
Yeah. So your daily now, you run your own business?
Yes.
Yeah, and so what does your day look like? Like, what do you...
It depends very much on where I am. So I'm living in Melbourne, as we said, currently. If I'm back in Aussie, which is usually about, say, 20 days out of the month, I'll be back in Aussie. It'll be Zoom meetings, emails, outreach, organisation, logistics, flights and travel, organising, planning, and connecting and liaising with clients.
So mainly to do speaking, coaching.
Speaking, workshops, engaging with professional sports teams, companies, organisations, government departments. A really wide, diverse.
Do you get a buzz out of it?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I genuinely enjoy the presenting side of things, but I think I'm also very mindful of the fact that, you know, I've ended up in this position through going through the cancer and you know, my story is so far from unique or special or uncommon. Everyone goes through challenges in life. Everyone takes away lessons and learnings. I feel really fortunate that I've had the privilege of being able to meet and work with people off the back of my very normal, very average adversity that I've faced. So, and then that'll be probably 3 weeks out of the month or say 20 days out of the month. And then I spend the remainder of the time travelling for work. I tend to pack, say, 5 engagements a month into a 10-day trip or so back to NZ. If the work is in NZ or else wherever else I'm travelling to for the work. And we'll come back, be based around the place and flit around the country, meeting and engaging with different teams for a day at a time and sort of travelling around. So yeah, it's good. It's busy. It's a lot of time on the road. I am looking forward to being back at NZ so that the travel times reduce a little bit.
What are you learning about running your own business now though? What's
it's funny. When I was going through school, I always sort of dreamed of being an entrepreneur. I thought it would be fantastic to be an entrepreneur.
Why is that?
I probably just had some sort of perception of them as being, you know, risk-taking, living life on the edge, the excitement, the challenge, the reward, all of that which comes with it. But by the time I'd made it about a year out of school or thereabouts, I'd come to terms with the fact that I lacked all of the prerequisites to be an entrepreneur. I'm not a particularly risk-focused or driven person. I am not necessarily great at self-directing a lot of the time. I would be infinitely better placed to be working in some sort of job on a corporate ladder where I had the opportunity to work my way up and build my way up, where I had the chance of progression and leadership in time, where I had a steady paycheck coming along in the meantime. So I think I really am a corporate world type of person who has accidentally fallen into being a business owner instead, and so I very much bumble and meander my way through everything. And as I'm 26 now, I've been running this business for 8 years now, and have done so pretty much learning on the fly throughout. I've never particularly had any guidance or advice. Dad runs his own building company, so I've had a little bit of advice and knowledge around that. But in a very different arena. But yeah, it's funny. I've learned a lot.
Do you have someone helping you? Like, does someone come along and help you?
No, not particularly. No, I sort of meander my way through.
Kevin Eder, who owns Trade Staff, is a client of ours, a good friend of mine. And I remember him telling me, because he was that kind of guy out the front and doing talks and all this sort of stuff, meeting clients, and he he saw himself, doing this sort of stuff, and then he got a PA, and basically she wanted the job, so because he put an advert out and then forgot that he put an advert out.
Oh yes,
and then 4 weeks later, she rang up and said, "Did you hire anyone?" He goes, "No." And she goes, "Well, can I have the job?" Basically, and she got the job. 30 something years later, she's the GM. Right?
Yeah, right.
But I think she said to him one day, "Look, you're the combine harvester out the front doing everything, and I'm the baler."
Yes,
fixing everything up,
yes,
and that he said that was the biggest game changer in his company when he had someone else fixing all the other stuff up because he knew what he was good at. So it's crazy what 8 years is still that's a long time, in business, and to keep doing it. What are some of the fundamentals that you've learned about going and talking to people and speaking and that sort of stuff?
I think the main thing, probably the biggest lesson, and by far the most consequential lesson I've learned about business in the last 8 years, is about the need for shameless persistence and dedication when it comes to pursuing people. And prior to, say, 2019 or thereabouts, for the first 3 or 4 years of my business, I did not do outreach. I waited for clients to come to me and reach out and to get in touch with me, because I felt ashamed of the idea of reaching out to people and trying to chase up and create work for myself. I thought that, I don't know, that whether it was putting myself out there too much, or whether it would frustrate or annoy other people, or whatever it may be, I just did not feel comfortable with doing that. And I was good friends with a guy by the name of Jake Miller, who was an entrepreneur as well, and who had extraordinary success at the same age and stage of life, which I'm at now, before unfortunately taking his own life back in 2021. And since his passing, and a period after that, I was given some of his email exchanges with some clients that he was trying to onboard for his company, Unfiltered, at the time, through one of his business partners, Yuki, who's a friend of mine as well. And when I went through this email exchange, it blew my mind, because he would have sent the better part of 15, 20 follow-up emails, cold follow-up emails, unanswered, before someone got back to him with a positive, affirmative answer. He pursued them relentlessly for months. He sent them an email every week for the better part of, say, 4 months, without ceasing, and eventually got a yes. Yeah. And I thought to myself, because at that stage I was reaching out to schools just to introduce myself and say hello. But to see the fact that Jake was able to go out and do that gave me such belief and confidence in myself to do the same thing. And nowadays I will, if you know a school principal, if there's a school principal listening to this, I guarantee that they'll be, I know Jake, that's that guy that pesters me over email, because I relentlessly send emails, follow-up emails, and follow-up emails to the tune of a dozen emails or thereabouts, without hearing back from anyone. And I frequently get schools and principals who come back to me after 2 years of persistently emailing them with no response, who will say, "Hey, really sorry to for the delay in getting back to you. Great to be in touch. It's been really busy here, but we'd love to have you come along and get involved and engage with our students." And so that's been the biggest lesson, and certainly the most shaping thing about my business has been the ability to just relentlessly chase up that work without fear of how you may appear to other people.
What a gift! What a gift that Jake gave you.
Absolutely.
Like to be able to teach from somewhere else. That's pretty cool, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because it's a lesson that most people will just quit after one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know this from dealing with people and even myself. We definitely quit too early. So it's something I'm going to take away for today. So thank you. That was a very sad, by the way. That young fellow was doing some really cool stuff in the world.
Yes, he was.
And but hey. Look, one of the things I want to share there is, when I think about this, is because I think about it when people create content, right? If you're doing some marketing, people don't create enough content, because they'll create one piece of content and no one really liked it and that sort of stuff. But what I've worked out over the years, there's quality people in the world and there's quantity people, and they're the same. They're both very valuable people. But here's the thing. one person, the quality person, you've got them at the right time. They've seen your email, or has she seen your email? Boom, they keep back to you.
Yeah.
Then there's the quantity person who's so busy, got so many balls in the air, blah, 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 wants to do business, but they just not ready. And I always say consistency message plus frequency reach to create relevancy. And all of a sudden, to become relevant, you have to be in front of people. You have to have that consistency of message.
Absolutely.
You have to be frequent with them, because then all of a sudden you become relevant. And that's the quantity person. It takes 20 emails to become relevant to that person, because they've just got so much, and they probably respect the fact that you're now actually following them up.
Yes. Yeah.
But here's the key, and here's why you do this now, though, and here's why I do it. When I'm on a mission and I want something, is because I believe in what I'm teaching.
Yeah.
I believe in what I'm doing. And if you believe in what you're doing and you know you can help these kids, too right, man. You send 30 emails because you need to wake up the quantity person. The quality person will wake up quite early, and they'll see it. But they both need your help. So most people quit. Most people get out of the queue. I always remember Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn. We talked about at the start. I remember him saying on this talk one day. He said, "How do you get to the front of the buffet queue?" And I thought, "Oh, that's a weird question." And people were he was asking a crowd, and people were like, "Oh, I don't know." And he says, "You stay in the queue." So many people get out of the queue.
Sure.
They jump out of the queue.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something over here. I'll go do that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something over here. I'll go do that. Oh, we'll go. This looks better. But if you stay in the queue, you get to the front of the queue, and that email is kind of like that,
Absolutely.
right? Staying in the queue. Man, that's a gift. So relentless. What did you say? Needless for shameless promo. What was it? What did you?
Shameless. Where's that?
You talked about you when you reach out.
Just
for shameless promotion.
But just persistence and dedication in terms of outreach.
I like it.
Yeah, I think, and like you say, it's been a real gift from Jake Miller to me, and I can probably say I don't know if my business would still be going. I don't know if I'd still be doing this line of work if it wasn't for that lesson and learning which came from him, because the bulk of work that I get stems from exchanges or interactions which I've had with clients who I have reached out to more than half a dozen times. I probably have half the workload that I do now if I hadn't have learned to persist in the way that I do now currently.
So good. So where do you see the future for your business? Like, obviously, do you want to grow it? Do you want to grow the message? Do you want to go? What's the?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not entirely sure quite what direction I see it taking. I don't necessarily see myself doing this for forever or for a huge amount of time longer. I think that the shape and iteration and format that it's taking is beginning to shift, and the work with the Inspire Foundation is a great example of them coming on board the team in the context of providing some more stable ongoing support for the grantees and the applicants at the Inspire Foundation. It's just one example of how it's starting to shift from more sort of transactional and fleeting engagement, like popping into a company and presenting for a day, into having the ability to have some sort of ongoing embedded engagement with an organisation, which I really enjoy. So I'm not quite sure. I think that the way and the format in which I do the work that I currently do will continue to shift and adapt. But for now, I'm really enjoying the opportunity to, for instance, travel and spend a lot of time around the place, meeting and engaging with different groups. It's a big draw card for me around the work.
Yeah, and also you're meeting some pretty cool people along the way, right? Your the depth of your connections and the relationships you're creating. Opportunities will always come up, and I think some of the stuff that you're doing with Inspire there. Is really taking it to that next level, which I think is really cool. Like when you start to see the humans, or the kids as I call them, because I'm a wee bit older, but the kids that are there, and that you can see that naivety in them, right? And they just need some guidance, and some people like yourself who've been through the whole program basically, right? And now. Leading the way, which is really, really cool. It's an amazing organisation.
It is. It's fantastic. And as you say, it's about, particularly in a New Zealand context, it's all about who you know and meet along the way, right? I became involved with Inspire off the back of working with Harcourts on their staff resilience and wellbeing. So I'm not quite sure where it'll be next for me, but I'll continue to sort of meander along and bump into different opportunities, and very much look forward to it.
I reckon for you could easily get into that coaching in training around that area, creating some programs that will be world class for organisations to really. And the thing is, it's becoming more and more than ever that companies and people need help with that sort of stuff, right? Like there's
certainly it's not the flash in the pan that many people expected it to be, right? We're seeing the integration of CWOs, chief wellbeing officers within the C-suite now, and it's not a phase that companies are shifting through. It's the increasing awareness and understanding of just how important it is to maintain staff well-being is it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and also and the reason for that is people need the help, right? They actually need the tools, they need the skills to actually grow as a company, but grow their people.
Yes.
Because of the pressures that are on people these days, which is immense, right? So, mate, I really appreciate you coming in. I always put guests on the spot at the end, and I thought of something for you. And I think you've covered a bit of it, but let's really put it into some context. What are 5 things, what you know now about even growing a business in through tough times, and what are some of the key things that you would do if you were starting again? Number 1, send more emails.
The outreach, the persistence and dedication side of things, the emails would be one. Leveraging connections and networks would be a really massive part of that.
When you think about leveraging connections, how do you build relationships? What's some of the skills?
I think it's being a decent person, right? I think and I think that a lot of the time people overthink that side of things, and people really feel like they have to. I don't know whether they have to. Consciously provide some sort of value for other people or make the relationship more transactional than it needs to be. I think people that just, I don't know, certainly I just enjoy meeting, talking to, getting to know and enjoy interacting with other people.
Being curious, right? And asking questions. Oh man,
absolutely.
That's cool. Oh, that's awesome what you're doing there. Oh, I love what you said there. Blah, blah, blah.
100%. Yeah. So that'd be the second. Third would have to be ensuring that the path which you take is in accordance and in direction with your values. Like we were talking about, is there. And
if you don't know your values, go and do the test.
Yes.
Go and find some
try and
information.
figure out and try and understand who you are as a person. Fourth would be the resilient side of things, and not being afraid to take the knocks, being prepared and having skills and tools and being equipped to deal with the challenges that do come from this. And there will be immense setbacks and challenges and suffering throughout that as well. I mean, COVID's a great example, and even within my business, during the COVID period, there was some online stuff, but if you describe my average month where I'm half of it's in one country, half it's in another country, through that time there was no work. There was me working in an Italian restaurant as a waiter in Surfers Paradise to pay the bills and to keep paying the rent, right? So I think that resilience and being willing to take a step back and to fall and fail and to keep getting up and trying again in spite of that.
Yeah, and getting up, I know being back to my grandmother this time, my great-grandmother, but then my grandmother, she said, Scott, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Yes. And
I always remember that, and that's when you talked about, if you're being resilient, you don't have to climb mountain alone, share stuff, being open to share with people, and I think that's a big part of it, eh? And there's no. I always remember when I came back from overseas, I was working in a restaurant, and I remember someone from my school coming in and go, "Oh, look at you, you're working in a restaurant," and I was like, and I was kind of like, that's interesting, it's because in my head I knew where I was kind of going, right, and I knew what I needed to do, but I just thought, wow, someone really cares enough to point it out, and mock it. And then so it is interesting. You've got to have that resilience. You've got to have that inside of you, to otherwise, man, you can go down a rabbit hole. You can really go into that what we call the sewer cycle. So.
And on that point as well, probably my fifth thing would be just backing yourself. Having the confidence to chase something and to go out there and continue to chase it. I think that particularly these days, so many young people have the mindset that their pathway needs to be the very well-trodden, well-established one. Everyone I know virtually came out of high school, went to tertiary study and didn't really have necessarily a great sense of direction or what they wanted to do with it, but saw it as a safe option of what to do. And for some of them, it's worked out well. For some of them, it's proven to be anything but safe. And I think, if you're a young person and we're going out and starting again now, or for anyone starting now, you've just got to back yourself to be able to go out and achieve.
So good.
The fifth.
I love that. Back yourself for me was a big one for me. When I worked in the corporate world, I started to see how the corporate marketing they were spending a lot of money, not measuring any of it.
Yeah.
And then I started working and I started meeting these entrepreneurial type of people, and they were measuring stuff. And one of them said, "Hey, to make yourself successful, you need a plan and you need to get educated." And I went, "Oh shit! Well, I didn't go to university." So, and he goes, "No, you idiot! Self-educate yourself."
Yes.
I was like, "Oh, okay, I can do that."
Yeah.
So I started going to these seminars in Australia around the World Internet Summit. It was one of the first in 2004 I went to, and I remember meeting this couple, and they said, "If you want to go out on your own, you got to back yourself." And I was like, "Okay, cool, I'll probably do that." And he goes, "You might as well have a plan with it." And I was like, "Oh, well, that other guy told me I had to have a plan as well." So this is starting to sound good. Yeah. He said, "Get 6 months worth of income, and then quit your job." And I was like, "Okay." Yeah. So I saved up 6 months worth of income, but because I was self-educating myself, I basically started to earn part-time money.
Yeah, sure.
So by the time I left, I had just about another thing going plus money. Now looking back, I wish I hadn't saved that much money.
Yeah,
I wish I had less.
Yep.
Because I got a bit lazy in those first few months of running my own business because I had money.
Yeah.
But what I do now and the way I run my business, I have tools in that for where the money goes. So my trading account always is at a certain amount where I want to build it up.
Yeah.
You know. So that was a big takeaway for me. But I just remember them telling you got to back yourself.
Yeah.
You know. And I guess that's the. You know it now, but sometimes it's hard to see that when you're looking to make that decision.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do number one anyway. Like from your I'm going to do more outreach because there's a bunch of people that I should be talking to that I'm not talking to. So if you get an email from me like 30 times, blame this guy.
Fault. Yeah,
blame this guy. Leveraging relationships. Like I believe in relationships. It's probably the thing in me that's probably I see that's something that I'm good at, and I go for depth of relationship, not width. I really believe, people, you see these people on LinkedIn all the time, I've got this many connections, and I'd rather have 10 and know them all, you know? That's how I know Paul, depth of relationships, not trying to width. Yeah. Value, and man, that's just such a big one. The resilience factor, I really like what you said about climbing the mountain today. That's hit me home. Don't climb alone. I think that for a lot of people, it ties into the lean on a gate. I think it's just huge. And then backing yourselves, man. Mate, I really appreciate it. What a conversation. I thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man. And so how do people get hold of you? Like, because people will be listening to this and they'll go, man, I want to get hold of this guy.
Yeah, probably my website's the easiest way to go about that, jakebailey.co.nz, and you'll find contact details and so on there as well, and a bit of information. So
and do you do speaking events? You've obviously got a book and stuff?
Yeah, 100%. Book, speaking, engaging with teams, companies, staff, organisations around a lot of different things. Get in touch. Like I say, I'm very much about chatting and meeting to people, so happy to connect with anyone.
We'll put this out on social media everywhere. And we'll also put all Jake's details in the show notes, and no doubt you'll get a few people calling you. Mate, I really appreciate you. By the way, guys, if you can do anything for me, you need to do one thing, and that's share this podcast. Someone needs to hear this message today. Look, we didn't talk a lot about marketing today, but that's okay. We talked about things that are more important. And how we help our younger people, and how we help even just good humans that are out there. Help them be more resilient. Help them see themselves in a brighter light. So share Jake's story because he can help more people, and together we can help a lot more people. So thanks for your time. Look forward to seeing you. Some great episodes coming up. But for now, go and share the podcast.